Why would you believe me? Because I want you to think. That's the biggest thing, is I want you to think about all of these things. And I'm trying to give you tools for thinking well and for thinking sharply about various topics. Hi, I'm Justin Barrett. I'm president of Blueprint 1543. I'm a psychological scientist and former university professor. And this is the second video in my series on how to be a cult leader, or what are the psychological and social dynamics of cults. And in this video, I'd like to take what I discussed in the first video and apply it to digital media or social media platforms. So then the question becomes, how can social media influencers start taking advantage of the psychological dynamics to form more or less cult-like kinds of followings? I identified 12 different kinds of steps, if you will, to be a successful cult leader in the previous video. And all 12 of them are sort of social, psychological kinds of techniques, persuasion techniques that can grow a following around an individual or a small group of individuals. And what I said characterized a cult was a group that has a high degree of control over its members and their social relationships, their thought processes, and especially those that then take advantage of that control for the good of the elite and not the good of the folks, of the cult members. Okay, that's when you're really drifting in the cult territory. Well, those, as I mentioned before, those 12 techniques, if you will, are techniques that lots of people use. Educators use, coaches use.
Oh, so cute. I just want to bite his chubby little cheeks.
Lots of people in sports environments, military uses, political candidates use. Lots of people use one or more of these techniques. It's unusual to get all 12 of them, or even maybe 6 or 7 of them in the same kind of context, because it's really hard to pull them all off. That's when you're really drifting into cult category. But one of the reasons why they've been so hard to pull off is because the very first sort of thing that you got to do, tip number 1 that I gave in that previous video was create your own reality. And I said a social reality or mental reality, creating your own reality. And that it's sometimes really hard to pull off because it usually requires a degree of social isolation, a degree of moving people out of their ordinary environments and living like in a commune or something like that. It's not the only way to pull it off, but traditionally that's the way to get a high degree of control. But you do that also then through some of these other techniques, like making it hard. Number 8 was making it hard for people to think clearly. Why? Because of, number 10, because you're manipulating their emotions artificially, or you are constantly playing new kinds of messaging or music over speakers and things like that. You're keeping them busy all the time. And you've taught them, number 9, self-censorship, so that even if they start to think, oh, what am I doing here? You've taught them that that's a little voice that they've got to quiet down.
But what does that have to do with it?
No. He's got a point.
Listen, you guys, you're sort of confusing me, so be gone. However I get rid of you guys.
That'll work.
Well, all of that kind of social control is often hard to do in traditional kinds of environments. Why? Because you've got family members who might not be part of the cult who, wander in and say, hey, what are you doing? What are you thinking? And have a conversation. Or your neighbors, or, your friends. There are other people out there who can pull you out of the influence of the cult and the cult's leadership. What happens then in this new social world that we're living in, where we can be captured by our digital media, particularly these social media platforms, where now I don't go out as much and maybe interact with other people. Increasingly, we have people living alone. In fact, we have a higher percentage of the population in the United States living alone than we have in, probably at any point. It's roughly a quarter of households are a single person living alone. Now, many of that is the elderly people, but it's not just elderly people. And even those who are living in homes, they're now living in small homes, small in terms of number of people, big houses, few people in them, and that sort of cliched kind of living in mom's basement kind of thing is there's some truth to this. Even if it's not the basement, we have a lot more space to ourselves in our houses a lot of times because there just aren't as many people living there. And even the people living there may be out at work and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more aloneness. And there other commentators have talked about how we're kind of in a lonely society. And so it's not a surprise then that being online and having these sort of interactions in our social media platforms fills kind of a social need. But of course, this becomes a self-fulfilling sort of negative downward spiral of and because I'm seeking social fulfillment in those environments, I'm not going out and interacting with the rest of the world. But all of that means then I'm very subject to the influence of people on social media, particularly what we call influencers, who have big followings. And they're taking advantage of some ordinary basic human psychology that are called social learning biases. Social learning biases are good things. Don't let that word bias throw you off. These are the mechanisms we use to figure out who should we learn from, who should we get information from. And there are a few that scientists like Joe Henrich and Pete Richardson and Robert Boyd have studied and have good evidence for. And they are, I'll just list 4 of these learning biases, social learning biases. One is what's called a prestige effect. People who are prestigious or have all the signs of prestige, they have an entourage, they have wealth, people look up to them. We want to pay attention to them. Second, skill. A skill bias, somebody who seems to have an incredible skill in a particular area, particularly one we care about, we're going to pay attention to. Skill bias. Prestige bias, skill bias, they're very similar sometimes.
Pick number 3, my lord. Oh, okay, number 3.
Third, similarity bias. We pay more attention to people we perceive to be like us by age, by our sex, by where we live, by our occupation. Lots of different features can be the like us. Personality wise, are they in our same Harry Potter house? Those are the people we want to pay more attention to. Are they part of my group? Similarity bias. And then conformity bias. Who's everybody else paying attention to? Okay, so those 4 kinds of things. Well, social media manages to distort our natural mechanisms for figuring out who's skilled, who's prestigious, who's similar to me, and who's everybody else paying attention to. It's designed to do that. So it makes people who have basically no skills, no backgrounds, look skilled because they control the content in such a curated kind of way that they can look more skilled than they are. They can sort of pontificate. I see the irony in this, but they can pontificate on things that they don't actually know a lot of things about. They may look more prestigious because, well, they've got an audience. And that's one of the markers of prestige, at least historically, because if lots of people are paying attention to somebody, that's evidence that they're prestigious, which gets more people paying attention to them, especially people that you already looked up to a little bit. It's sort of a pyramid scheme of attention. And now people pay attention to people just because they are famous. And they may be famous just because they managed to put up the right clickbait or who knows what. Okay, so there's something that's being manipulated there for us to pay attention to certain people. Then because we are kind of herded by the algorithms and so forth, we end up being on platforms with people who are more similar to us than, or at least look to be similar to us because they're there too. And so it looks like they're paying attention to the same kinds of things we're paying attention to. And they may actually have nothing to do with our regular lives. If we'd met them on the street, we would think we have nothing in common. But the signs of having something in common, similarity, is being mimicked. And then, oh, well, I'm part of 100,000 people viewing this video or watching this person live stream. So there's this sense of big numbers of people herding toward this influential person, even though that 100,000 people are scattered out all over the globe and might be entirely irrelevant, or maybe they're half bots. I don't know. So it's a distorted view of reality that then draws us to these people. And then they have the possibility of manipulating that appearance and image to create that artificial reality that I said at the outset is so hard for cult leaders to pull off. It's arguably easier once you have a followership on social media to create those same kinds of ideas. So then a social media influencer might start creating their own reality by using very particular kind of language, by encouraging their followers to buy and eat particular kinds of things, guiding them to very narrow sources of truth, particularly the social media influencer's own channel. Might begin fixing their mind on, say, a health and wellness kind of phantom out there. That was step number 2. fix their imagination on a phantom that if they will only follow me and what I tell them to do, they will get there. But that get there is always elusive. It's always one more step away. We're never completely transparent with the messaging or what it is that I'm trying to sell or how to get there, so that you have to keep coming back to get more and more information. And you have to come back to me. I'm the only link to the prize. That was step number 4. I might subtly drop, or I might let other people, my proxies out there, create a mythology about my background to make me even more trustworthy and sort of a romantic character worth following. That's step number 5. Step number 6, I might incrementally increase demands, subscriptions, merch, other ways that you have to invest in me so that I get more and more of your attention and connection to me. I get you to recruit other people to me. I get you to convert them to me. That was step number 7. I get my converts to make new converts. And I try to keep you on as much as possible and keep you busy, and maybe even do broadcasts at weird times of night so that you're sleep deprived or you're not thinking well. I might encourage the use of certain kinds of mind altering drugs so that, again, you can't think very clearly for yourself, and you'll be especially subject to what I have to say to you. Those are step number 8, making it hard for people to think clearly. Then all I need to do is play into the teaching you self-censorship. You might start thinking that what I'm telling you is nonsense. Don't believe that voice in your head, and here's why. Oh, you've got to work really hard to keep shutting it down. Oh, other people will try to lead you astray. Here's what you say to them. So I teach you to censor yourself, your own thoughts, and other people. I manipulate your emotions. I piggyback on familiar themes. And then, of course, my ultimate aim, number 12, was to keep increasing the number of my followers and the wealth that I'm getting from them. So it's easy, at least for me, to see from this analysis of those sort of 12 steps on how to be a successful cult leader, how they can be taken advantage of to a certain extent in social media kinds of contexts. So I'm sharing these so that we can together be more wise about our use of social media, because it does push so many of these sort of natural psychological buttons for us. And it sets us up to be more vulnerable to certain kinds of followership of people who have not earned our loyalty. They don't have some special insights to share with us. And so we need to be very careful and thoughtful about what they're saying. Now I'll close this video with I know what some of you skeptical people are thinking is, and you're trying to do the same thing to me. Let me assure you, I'm not. And, why would you believe me? Because I want you to think. That's the biggest thing, is I want you to think about all of these things. And I'm trying to give you tools for thinking well and for thinking sharply about various topics. I will periodically try to refer you to other people's work and other people's resources. So I'm not trying to narrow your scope of thinking, but broaden it. And I'm also encouraging you to push back on me, ask questions, leave comments. If I feel like I've got something worth saying to comments, I do try to answer them. So like, subscribe. I do encourage you to share with other people you think will find these videos valuable, so that we can avoid those people who really are trying to be cult leaders, among other things. I'm going to do, I think, one more video in this series on cult leaders, where what I want to talk about is what are the signs that a church or other kind of religious community that you're part of seems to be drifting in a cultish kind of direction, because we want to watch out for that too. So that'll be the next video. But thanks for joining me for this one, and I will see you next time as we avoid cult leaders together. Bye for now.